December 17th, 1982. This is Judy Michener and Joe Todd interview with Mrs. Ollie Gage. Mrs. Gage, when were you born?
Monterey, Tennessee.
And when's your birthday?
March 9th, 1900.
How long did you live in Tennessee?
We came here in March. We landed here March the 20th and March the 9th. I was 8 years old, and we landed here at Walnut in the 20th of March, 1908.
Who was your father?
Jeff Henry.
And what did he do?
He farmed.
And he was in Tennessee?
Right.
And who was your mother?
Chrissy Robertson.
How come your father came to Oklahoma?
Well, he'd heard about this land of milk and honey, and so he decided he'd come and learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you have any childhood memories of Tennessee?
oh yes, I went to school 2 years. We only had 3 months of school during the summertime, and we walked 2 miles around the side. We lived on the edge of the mountain, and we walked around the edge of the mountain 2 miles to a little school called Mill Creek.
What part of Tennessee is this?
Middle Tennessee.
Near Nashville?
Middle Tennessee.
How far from Nashville?
Let's see, what? Putnam County. We live about 90 miles from Nashville.
And who was your favorite teacher in school in Tennessee?
Well, the first teacher I had when I started school was Glenn Redding. She was a young girl, and she was from town. And of course, I didn't like her. The first day I went, I knew my letters and I knew my numbers, but when she called me up, to recite, my tongue had just become stuck, and I just couldn't say a word. So she said to one little boy, she said, "You'll go get me a switch." And when she said, "Go get a switch," why, it come unstuck. And I didn't like her, though. She was just teaching in the regular teacher's place when I started. But the other teacher, her name was Laura Watson, and I loved her. Everybody loved her. She was really kind and a good teacher. The next teacher I had then was, I guess one of her teachers. We came here and we walked from a half mile west of town here over to Lone Oak to school. And Mrs. Tomlin was the teacher.
That was my first teacher, too.
She had a little two-wheel cart. She wore a bonnet and calico dresses when we went to school about 6 weeks here out of that spring. Then the next, we moved out north of town after that. We picked cotton that fall for an old gentleman just west of town. And my brother and I, he was 7 and I was 8. The two of us averaged 100 pounds of cotton. I mean the two of us, about 50 pounds each. We got 50 cents a pound. And we all picked cotton. There were a big family of us. My mother had 13 children. She lost 2 in infancy. The rest of them are all living except 2. And she had 7 girls and 6 boys. And there's still 6 of us girls yet. We range from 70 to 94 years old. And
Do they all live in this area?
well, no, they're scattered. Some live in California, some live down around Lindsay, some live at Chickasha. They're just scattered. There's one, my oldest sister, she lives here in Walnut. She was 94 in October, and she lives here in Walnut.
Well, she still lives here in Walnut?
Right.
What's her name?
Creedy Whitaker.
How did you come to Oklahoma?
By train. Long journey.
Remember anything? What happened on the train trip that you remember?
Oh, well, I had a little sister about 2 years old. I remember she could just run in those cars and cry. She cried all the way. And I remember the stools on the train. you thought you really looked, you thought you were going to fall through. You could see the crossed eyes, you know. And that was terrible. But we went by Louisville. We had to go roundabout ways. We went to Nashville. Well, we had to stay there a certain length of time. Then we got a train and we went by Louisville, Kentucky, and through there. And we had to lay over in Louisville. And there was a guy that took a notion, we thought, to rob my mother, you know. And our train was delayed. Well, finally we got our train. We came on the Rock Island from there to Shawnee. Then we had to transfer from there over to the Santa Fe Depot. From there to Walnut. Quite around.
You say a man was going to rob your mother?
Mm-hmm.
How did you...
Well, I just don't remember. He kept telling her, why don't you go to sleep? Why don't you go to sleep? Said, that your train won't be here for so-and-so. It won't be in here until tomorrow. And so she just finally decided, like, he wanted her to go to sleep so he'd get, well, she only had $75 and a whole bunch of kids. But she wouldn't go to sleep, and anyway, he finally walked out and left her.
And where's your father?
He had come on ahead of us and got located. And then she sold out what we had there. And
what kind of house you had in Tennessee?
Well, it was, I think about a 3-room, just rawhide, made from rawhide. We lived right by a big lumber yard where the lumber mill, sawmill, where they made lumber. And my father hauled lumber about 9 miles up the mountains to Monterey, Tennessee. He hauled lumber in each day. And when he'd come back with his empty wagon, he had to tie the brakes down, you see, because it would just run over the team, you know, coming back down. And he'd make 1 load a day, and it would be dark when he got home. So that's what he did there. And he farmed. He raised corn, and we had milk cows, and always had our meat, you know, and vegetables. My mother raised a garden. And so that's just about the way we lived in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Then when we came here, well, the first crop he made was a sharecropper, you know. You get half, you know. They furnished your everything, and you got half. And I'll tell you, we were really, in the fall of 1980, he bought out a crop when he came. He bought a man out. And it began to rain and flood. You remember 1908 floods. And we didn't make a stalk of corn or anything. Well, he and the older girls, they got out and chopped cotton that spring. Sometimes they would get 50 cents each, you know, a day. And sometimes they'd get what they called a side of bacon for their day's work. That's the way we existed through the summer. Well, he'd get out and if he found a quail's nest, he'd rob that and bring those eggs in, you know, and boil them for us kids. He always thought of his kids. And kill squirrels. We had squirrels and dumplings and rabbit and just whatever you could catch. Mm-hmm. And by the time winter come, I'll tell you, just about all we had of our clothes was just a few little tatters. So he got a sharecrop then. And we began to build up. And in 1917, he bought the farm that we had worn it out with cotton. But as you're talking about 1913, now that was a bad year. And we didn't raise any cotton. Up on the prairies where we were, the cotton burned. And so he owed a $60 grocery bill. I mean, that was for the whole year now, understand, $60. And he said, all right, children, we've got to go now down around the creeks, around Lone Oak and back in there, they raised cotton. They had good cotton on the creeks. Said, we've got to go and pick cotton and pay this grocery bill. We walked 2 miles, 2.5 miles. Get up in the morning, and my sister and I, we'd milk the cows before it was daylight. And Mother'd fix us a lunch. We'd eat our breakfast, and we'd go walk 2.5 maybe miles, pick cotton. It'd be frost, and the ground froze when we left home. Well, about 10 o'clock, it'd begin to thaw up, and the ground would get muddy, and just slop, you know, and then it'd go to freezing about 4 o'clock. We'd walk back home, do our chores then. And when he got enough to pay the grocery bill, he said, well, now you can take what you make now to buy your school clothes. You can have what you make. Now that's the way we lived then. She was telling you the truth too there. Well, we finally, I married in 1921. And my husband was a World War I veteran. I never saw him. I never had saw him in my life. His sister was our neighbor, one of our good neighbors. And I've addressed a many of letter to him, somewhere in France. I never thought I'd ever see that man. So he just popped up all of a sudden, you know. He came in to see them after the war was all over. So there's where that started.
What was his name?
Edward Gage. He was a good guy, too. That's after he was through with World War I.
You say he was on the border with Pershing?
Yes, they went into old Mexico in 1911, and he was there 2 years, and then they went from there to France. Now that was supply wagons. They didn't have cars and trucks then, you see. And they hauled their supplies in these wagons.
And he drove a supply wagon.
Supply wagon, 4 mules. And
was he in the army?
Yes, he was in the army.
Was he in the militia, or was he in the regular army at that time?
He was in the regular army. And he was stationed in El Paso, Texas when they left to go to old Mexico.
Yeah, that's Fort Bliss.
Uh-huh. And so they took their teams, and his team was the only team that came back to America. Out of a bunch, I don't know how many teams went. But there were about 200 soldiers that went over there with, and he went all through the war with General Pershing. They came back to New York, and they paraded in Chicago and several of the big cities. And he rejoined and went to Louisville, Kentucky. And he served part of another, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, there. And so we married, and he had pretty fair health for about 10 years. We had 8 children. We had 5 girls and 3 boys. And so after he was disabled, well, I raised the family, you might say. Took care of the stock and what have you. And finally, he left me in 1966. He lived to be 77 years old after going through. But he was in 5 of the biggest battles were fought there. And I couldn't tell you what they were, but I don't know anyway, Musargon and Santa Hill and defensive sector and some forest, I don't remember. But I did have all of these things, and he got medals. He has on one up there. That's couldn't name it because Croix de Guerre or
that's the Croix de Guerre, yeah.
And he got a Silver Star. He was a Silver Star man. Mm-hmm. But we had it rough. And about Wanette, she told you about all about Wanette that I could, with the exceptions of Mr. Pemberton owned one of the gens, and Mr. Lyle owned one, Mr. Black owned one,
Mr. Lyle,
and I just don't remember who owned the other one. But beginning with the stores up here, Joe Mundy, he had this hardware store. Then there was 3 grocery stores there on down, from there on down, 4. Moon's owned one, Kugel's owned one, and Eb, I believe his name was Eb Wright. He owned the old rock building, it's out away from us. And then going on down, well, there was a barber shop. I don't know who ran it, but Mr. Williamson, he ran the post office. It was in the back of that big building there. And L.E. Denny, he owned the store. And then going on west, there was the the State Security Bank. You remember the State Security Bank? And then we had in around 1920, it was before I married anyway, Mrs. Green, she put in a picture show, silent picture show. Movies, that's the first movies that I ever saw. It was silent pictures. And then Mr. Ivy's cafe. Then on down was Bull Skinner, they called him, blacksmith shop. Going back on the other side was a produce, Ketchum, I believe. And then John Smith had a 2-department store on up. And then there was Sam Stokes had a furniture store then, going on up that way. And in later years, they put in a movie there, with talking pictures, And then there was a Ola, Esther Ward and Ola, they had a grocery store in there. And then Joe Ryder, he had one. And then the National Bank, First National Bank. Then going on across, Beckner's, Jess and Orrin Beckner. And Orrin Beckner lived, this was his house then. And they run a grocery and a dry goods store. Then we had a bakery, I don't know who run it. And we had a butcher shop, and John Heatley run it a while. And then we had there was a cafe then in there, and then Will Weaver, he had I believe he had a 2-department store. In Sam Weaver, this building we have down here, well, that was the State National Bank. Sam Weaver, he owned it. And then we had a printing office. We had a grocery store, Lackey's. Lackey's grocery store was right where Raymond's place is now. That was Lackey's grocery store. And then on east of that, we had a milliner shop. Then we had a little printing office, printed the Wanette News. Wanette Messenger, I believe it was. And I wrote items to that for a long time. And so that's just about the business part of what was going on there when we first came in here. But it's all changed now. You see, there's not anything hardly left. We just have one grocery store here now.
You left out the doctors, and I did too. We had 2 doctors.
Yeah, we had Dr. Royster.
And Dr. Ball.
Yeah. Dr. Royster delivered 2 of my babies, and Dr. Ball delivered 6. We had our babies at home. In fact, I'm sleeping on the same bedstead now that my babies, 6 of them are born on.
You said a 2-department store. What do you mean?
Well, like over here, he had groceries. And then there was a door you could go over in here, and another one just about the same size, and
Had
dry goods.
over
in that
and
side.
shoes, clothes, and
I see. Just
And
curious.
in 1921, I sold eggs for 5 cents a dozen.
and then
And
paid 5 cents a yard.
bought cotton material for 5 cents a yard.
Yeah.
Things certainly have changed.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Depression of 1907, 1908?
Pardon?
You remember the Depression of 1907 and 1908?
Well, I remember it with us. But I don't, well, I guess there was a depression. I remember in 1913, that was when we had to go pick cotton and pay that big old grocery bill, you know. And now I can go to the store and buy that much groceries, and I don't have anything.
One trip.
Carry it back in one arm.
Were there any organized activities for World War I and Wanette? Like any bond drives or?
Yes, they had bond drives, and they also up over this. I forgot that over this Beckner store, the Woodman of the World. You may remember the Woodman of the World. Well, they had their hall up there, and my daddy he was the Woodman of the World. He called the Woodman of the World, you know. But that I couldn't tell you anything about. That was secret organization. But as I say, then in 1934, well, my children went to school. We lived at Trousdale then. My husband and I, we lived close to Trousdale, and we owned 120 acres over there. And they rode the school bus in to school, and we had soup line for the children. They had soup. And I have one of the soup bowls yet that they used in the soup line. That's all they had was soup, and that was pretty rough in 19. So I have really remembered 2 depressions, and we're about to enter another one, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Now, your husband was a farmer?
Well, he worked on this railroad here 9 years. He worked on the railroad 9 years.
What did
and
he
went
do?
out. Pardon?
What did he do in the railroad?
Well, they bent over with a pick and put in cross ties. And
Okay, he was a track man.
yes. They called them section hands, you know.
Okay.
And they had a foreman, you know, their boss. They called him a foreman.
Where'd they get the ties? Who made the ties?
I don't know. They were shipped in here. They were shipped in. But Had those great big spikes they drove, you know. I mean, they worked, and then they put this rock in. They had to tamp this rock, and it was. I'll tell you, that was terrible. That was a man-killing job. But after that, he just got to where he wasn't able to do very much. But we farmed a few years, and I helped right in the field, drug my babies on the cotton sacks, and we worked together. We had one purse. It didn't have much in it, but we had one purse. And I raised chickens, sold eggs, all that was surplus. Anything that you could raise and that you could get a little something out, you know, and sell fryers. And, well, that would buy a pair of shoes for the girls or, you know, someone that needed them. Usually one pair of shoes for the winter was what they got.
One pair a year.
Yeah, sometimes. But really, I think people are happier and better off than they are now. There's very little happiness in the world today. People are not satisfied. There are some people that seem like the more they get, the more they want. And I never felt that way, and he never. We just worked to raise our family. And I had 4 of my boys have seen service. One was in the Air Force, and he made a career. He retired from the Air Force. One, my youngest one, he was in Vietnam, 14 months, and he was in active duty. He helped set those mortar guns. Well, they'd set a little bit, and then they'd have to move them. And they couldn't, the water there, the temperature around 120 and 30 degrees. Heat. And I would send him this, Kool-Aid, sweetened Kool-Aid. We'd send cookies and we'd send stuff, you know, and they shared it with each other. But he said the only way he could drink water was just to put Kool-Aid in it, the kind of water they had. And so he got back okay, though. He was lucky he got back. And I had one boy that was, I said he's the bravest soldier of all. He was just getting ready to go to sign, you know, to go into the Army. And he was working at Cherokee, Oklahoma, helping build a Safeway store. And there was a leak down in the basement, a water leak and a gas leak down there. And the boss hadn't come in, but they decided they'd go on to work. And they said, if we can fan that gas out, we can work down there in that basement to see about the leaks. And they wanted him to carry the fan down. He said, no, I won't carry it down. He said, I'll plug it in. And the man that carried it down, when he plugged it in, it ignited that. And my son was burned 75% of his body, second, 3rd degrees, and lived 11 days. But I said he was the bravest soldier of all. So I have the rest of them. I have 7 children left, and they're all fairly well and happy. But you just have to see these things and know these things and go through these things to really know what it is. But I'm here, and with the insurance that we got from his accident, that's why I got this home. Yeah. He left me this home. Mm-hmm. So that's just about all I can tell you. Oh, I can tell you a lot more. I have written, and I've written about farm life. I've written little sketches, you know. But I gave it to my granddaughter, and she told me she's going to have it all reprinted. In the covered wagon days, I have a skit written about that. I could have, I guess, sold all of it, but I didn't want to.
Well, you copies that if we could.
Sure. So, but they're all proud of it, you know.
What's the first movie you saw and won it?
Well, I'll tell you, the first one I recall was in 1918. That was during the war, World War I. And they had a 3-day picnic right down in that bottom area below where the depot used to be. They had a 3-day, they called it a Red Cross picnic. And they had this gentle mule swings, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it was really thrilling. And that afternoon, we went to a movie down here, silent. And I know, all I remember was the airplanes seemed like they're going to come right out at you, you know. They're just going to come right out at you. And that's the first movie that I ever saw.
Was it about the war?
Mm-hmm. war pictures.
You don't remember the name?
No, I don't.
Do you remember who was in it?
No, I don't.
I just wondered if
Just
you
about the
might.
only thing I remember was just those airplanes. There were little things in, of course, but looked big to me, you know. And I was 18, and I was grown about it. You know, thought I was.
I just wondered if it was Buddy Rogers and Janet Gaynor in Wings.
No, I don't imagine they do. Well,
Could we get copies of the thing that you've written when your granddaughter gets them?
I don't know if she'd let me have them back now or not. I just turned them over to her. And so but you know, for a long time here after I was left by myself, like if it was snowing about 2 years ago, we had the prettiest snow, and there's something about snow that fascinates me. I don't like wading in it anymore. I used to love to, but when that snow falls like that, big flakes, you know, I just got my pencil out and my paper, and I wrote a skit about the snow, you know, and all these things, and I wrote a little bit of poetry, you know, just little dabs of stuff. But
Did you have anything published anywhere except in the newspaper?
no,
Oh, that's too
all
bad.
I ever had published was when I was, I guess, grown, and this Dallas News, they called it. They had a cousins page. No, I'll take that back. It was another paper. I don't remember what paper it was. I guess it was Shawnee News. That's what it was. And they wanted someone to write about the martins, the birds, you know, the martins. And I wrote a little skit about that, you know. And the next week they printed my letter, you know. And then I wrote to this Dallas News one time, to the cousins page, and about our Sunday schools, you know. You know, there's so many denominations, and a lot of times they're kind of prejudiced, you know. But we had, my sister and I, and my husband's niece, we organized a Sunday school out there at our district schoolhouse. And we ran that about 4 years, in fact, until my sister and I married. And we got non-denominational union. We got union literature, non-denominational. And people from all churches just come in there, you know, and we just enjoyed it so much. And so after we began to get married, well, it all went down then. They said we couldn't do it, but we did for 4 years. And we would have Children's Day programs, you know, and things like that, and singings.
What's your granddaughter's name?
Shelley.
Where does she live?
I kept her 2 years while her daddy was in Vietnam. I kept her 2 years.
Where does she live?
Oh, she's in Oklahoma City somewhere, but I couldn't tell you.
Is her last name Gage?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to contact her, see if she'd let us have copies of what you've written.
Well, I'm going to try to contact her during Christmas. She's working up there. She's a collector, you know, collects bills and things like that. And she had written or typed a copy of All My Children, you know, and give it to her daddy. But I guess she just don't have time to do these things.
Do you remember any poetry you've written?
Well, not really. It's just short stuff, mostly about my kids, some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. My daughter, I have a daughter though, she's an artist and she's written a lot. And this boy was in the Air Force. He has composed an awful lot of songs. In fact, I've got some of his records here. He had a band, you know, and he went to Germany and was there 2 years. And so he had a band there, you know. And they went to Heidelberg. That's the capital of Germany, you know. And while he was there, they went to Heidelberg. He took his band. And they went there and they sang these Western songs. And so I did have what his, is there in the Heidelberg paper too. They printed it up. And I kept that till he come back and I turned it over. But they said, they thought that was the most wonderful thing that ever happened. Said they thought that music, you know, would enhance the relationship between Germany and America. And I just couldn't figure that out. But he had all this stuff written up, but I turned it back over to him and come back. And he still composes songs, has his music and stuff like that.
What's his name?
Calvin Gage. He lives at Okmulgee. But he's had offers to buy his songs, but he won't sell them. I have some records here that he made. He made records. I have some of his little records.
Did his band have a name?
Let's see. Yes, it did. Now, I'll tell you, I just can't remember the name of it. Well, I had my two youngest boys. They formed a band here in Walnut, and they played around here and there a lot. And theirs was the Wasp Nest Rebels. They played here at the American Legion, had dances every Friday night there. Mm-hmm. Then they went to Shawnee, and I believe it was American Legion up there. It was upstairs anyway. I was there one time, and they played there on weekends for a good while. But they don't, they're all. Then my youngest daughter and her husband, they live at Fort Sumner, New Mexico, and he's driving a truck from there to Lubbock, Texas. But on weekends they play. And they were scheduled for this coming Saturday night. They just play on weekends.
Uh-huh.
And they were scheduled for Saturday night. And they said sometimes they get $500, for.
My goodness, they're doing very well.
What's your fondest childhood memory?
Oh, I don't know. I had a lot of fond memories. I just really couldn't tell you. I just had. Hunt wildflowers, pick berries, just by myself. I never was afraid. And we'd find wild strawberry patches, this little patch of strawberries. Well, I knew where they all were, and I'd go from one to the other, and I'd get enough of berries to make a shortcake. I guess one time I picked enough to make a cake for my daddy's birthday, and I picked him a little bunch of violets, And I guess that was one real. Because I've always remembered that. Maybe it was strawberry shortcake.
There is one question that I would like to ask you. I've been sitting here thinking about it. When you all were younger, and you too, Mrs. Horner, did your mother quilt? Did you learn how to quilt and all those things like that?
What?
Quilt.
I expect I've quilted 75 quilts.
Bless your heart.
Myself.
My grandmother quilts, and I've always been fascinated by it. And
I still have about 3 of my quilts that I quilted. But in later years, I just hired a quilter.
Put in the quilts.
Uh-huh. Oh, now see?
I have a friendship quilt that when I first moved here to Walnut, the elderly ladies, they all pieced me a block. There's 20 blocks in it. And each one put her name on it. And I used it a little, and I washed it one time, but it's folded away now, and I've given all my quilts away to my children, except I think I have 4 left. But nearly all those old ladies are gone. There's just about 5 or 6 of us left,
I know that's a precious thing to
I was showing it to some of the grandkids the other day, and they said, Granny, who's going to get this quilt? I said, well, I'm keeping it while I'm here, but I said, we're going to go and you're going to have to draw straws for it.
You all use a quilting frame? When you got
great big old. I have put one right here in this room and quilt out a quilt.
Y'all had the neighbors come over and help you do the oh.
Yes, your quilt start on one side and you quilt a reach. You call it a reach.
And you roll it.
And you roll it,
And quilt over so far and roll it again.
And then you go to the other side and you get through while you're in the center.
I've always been fascinated.
And talking about making soap.
I've quilted fans. I've quilted this way and
now, did you make your line? Did you make soap?
No, my mother did.
Quilted by the
piece. She had, they called it an ash hopper. They had boards fixed this way,
Take 2 cents.
And then they throw their ashes in.
Quilting.
Okay.
That's when it takes time.
Oh,
now,
yes.
How do you make line? I was getting both of them at the same time.
I'm sorry, but we were so into quilting over here.
They had this ash hopper. It was made like this and set down on the ground. And they'd throw the ashes in there, and then they'd throw water in there, and this would run out, and they'd catch it in some container, And they made their soap. It was crude-looking soap. I'll tell you, I remember it. It was dry, but it kind of snarled up and was hard. You couldn't get it off hardly. But we learned a better way to make it.
Yeah.
And the kind that we made later. Now I have, and making a hominy, I take ashes, clean ashes, and put them in a dish pan, about half full of ashes, and I'd fill it full of water. And then I'd let that all settle. I'd stir it 2 or 3 times, and when it cleared, I'd dip that clear water off. And I'd put, say, about a quart of corn in a big kettle. I put that lye in there. You cook it until it will peel that hull off from the grain. And when you peel that off, well, you wash it, and wash it. And then it takes about all day to cook your hominy. But when it's done, it's hominy.
It's heat better than stuff we have now,
Yeah.
too. Made out of that
So when you run
ashes,
water
you
through
have to
your,
have oak timber ashes, to do it with.
so when you run water through the ashes, that makes your lye.
That makes lye.
But my grandma did that, but I never did see that. I never was interested in that part. I made soap now.
You know, my mother
Well, I
makes
love
soap.
to do it. I did. I just love to. I made soap here for Miss Blevins. I made soap for her. And all I did, I would make it on the halves, and I furnished the lye. And I always would put borax in it. If I couldn't get the borax, I'd put a little soda in my soap, made it lighter, and it washed better.
Yeah.
And anyway, her husband, he said, well, I'm going to pay you for that lye. I said, oh, no, I furnished the lye. But that's the only money I ever got. He gave me $50.
No, my mother
Papers.
still makes, Judy, my
Papers
mother still
lye.
makes soap.
But I made for several people here in Monette. After I moved here, I made soap.
You can't get none of that eagle lye, though, now to make soap with, like we.
I've got some of it here right now. I keep it.
Where do you get it at?
Got it down here at the store about a year ago.
There's a different kind of lye, and it makes a different kind of soap. It makes a powdery stuff in the morning, Just like this powdered soap, you buy in these boxes at the store.
Yeah, it's, I think, I love to reminisce, Sometimes, when I just love to reminisce about things and go back, I just love to. Of course, there's a lot of things, and now I don't remember names like I used to. I used to just remember everybody's name.
I did too.
No,
We used to have an ice dock down here.
our kids, we entertained our children at home. We bought one of the girls a piano.
Country,
And we entertained at home. And all my children are musicians. And so the boys would come in, school boys would come in. They'd come here at nights, and they'd go in their room, and they'd play their guitars and sing until bedtime. We knew where they were when they were at home. And I think that's something to entertain your children at home. And all those boys now are graduated in Trousdale schools in here. And I guess I have pictures of quite a few of them, and they'd send me their commencement, announcements. And those kids all called me Ma. We were Ma and Pa. And my tickets here, years ago we about all the cash we had, he got a little veterans check. I think he started with $11 something a month after all he went through. And so we traded 30 days time. Just make tickets, And I could go to the store today and pay for anything that I get. But I just gotten so habit that I still go and I make tickets, and I buy a lot more by doing that than I would if I was using cash, because I hate to go and, pay for this and pay for that and just go into an old purse all the time. So my tickets are
30
Gage.
30-day tickets.
Small Gage. Right down here at
It's
this
easy to
store,
write
I
it
trade
down.
down there some. Yeah, I go to Shawnee and buy some things.
I mean, it's easy on you.
Well, I can understand that.
And my sole income now is just my veterans widow check.
You said something
$300 a
about
month. Well, I try to keep the home kind of up, but it's getting to where that you can't get anybody to do anything, and it's kind of going down. And I am too, so. But I've been here in this house 32 years.
Well, as I told
I
somebody,
said we'll go down together.
I told them not long ago, I said, well, it's like that. I said, their stuff's getting old, falling apart, so are we. But I said, when we pass away, I said, they're just going to take what remains and throw it down here in the ditch anyway. Won't nobody want it.
No. You said something about peddling ice or the ice dock a minute ago.
Yeah, we used to have an ice dock down here.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we had an ice dock here. They made ice.
Stores, they delivered ice out in the country from house to house.
Those are the days when you had the old ice boxes.
Uh-huh.
When you were
Yeah,
lucky
you
to
go
have
to
that.
buy 50 pound or 100 pounds, you
Uh-huh.
know, and blah.
By the time they got there with it, half of it was melted. Take the other half to cool it down. When I got my first refrigerator was, well, let's see now, that was when we moved here in 1950. I got my first refrigerator in 1950. We got electricity out in the country. It was a little thing, you know, but boy, you don't know how. Oh, that cream just come up on that. Yes. Now we appreciated it.
Sure.
Well, I appreciated that where we bought ice and cooled our stuff with it. Now that
we
was
didn't.
heaven
It
to
just
me.
didn't last. It just wouldn't last. Well, I'll tell you, there's lots of good memories, but I wouldn't want to go back.
It's too hard.
I wouldn't want to live those days over again. And,
Well, in
and
a
I always
way, I
hope
would
that
like to be a part of
young
it.
people of today wouldn't ever have to.
What would you like to live over?
Well, I'd just like to go with the young folks back now and live part of, my life over. Just let them see the difference, and see how much nicer in a certain way they've got it. And they don't appreciate it. When we thought we was getting something great, back there. But they'd think, oh, that nonsense.
It's difficult for them to relate. They have everything so easily handed to them these days.
My older children had it rough, and they know a little about it. But the younger ones don't. They had it better. I know my baby, when he graduated, I said, now, Walter, I said, you've been in the nest all of your life. I said, you've got to get out and try your wings now. We told our children, now we had those two little boys when we moved here to town. They were 9 and 11. And they mowed lawns, the old push mowers they used to have. And they'd go out and they'd get 50 cents to mow a lawn. But they mowed lawns about, I guess, a couple of years. And then we finally bought one of the little power mowers. And we told them, well, we'll furnish the gas and you have what you make, but you take care of it and you buy your clothes. And so they carried papers here. They carried the Shawnee News. One of them would take the south half of town from here south, and the other would take the north half. They'd get up before daylight. Now, just mind you, about 9 or 10 and 11 years old. They were 18 months apart. And they'd get their papers delivered, and I always had my breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning. I learned that when he was working on the railroad. It was 6 in the morning, and on the weekends when he was there, it was 12 noon, 6 in the evening, and until yet. I'm in the habit. I want to eat my dinner. I want to eat my breakfast at 6, my dinner at 12, and my supper at 6. Just so long, that it's just, of course, I don't do that all the time, but I just feel like that
That's when you get hungry.
I just think you're going to get hungry now.
Well, speaking of lunch, they have lunch down there for us.
Well, and these ladies are probably hungry, too.
Oh, we had dinner down there yesterday. We had the office dinner down there yesterday, you ever saw.
What'd you eat? What'd you have?
Oh.
That was it. What did you eat? Well, you eat everything.
There was a lady that she cooked dinner for and brought it in there for the elderly citizens. There were 42 there, wasn't there?
49.
She cooked that dinner, paid for it.
There was 49.
Was 49. And she gave everybody a present, and she gave everybody a sack with orange and bananas and apples and candy in it. Now that woman, she goes out.
That's nice.
And then I heard this morning that her husband's store was robbed yesterday while she's serving dinner down here
Up
in Oklahoma City.
But we took up money for, $1 a piece, and some give more than that. So I think she had about $40, and but they put it on a little tree, tied it on a little Christmas tree, She said, she said, I didn't want y'all to do this. I said, we didn't want you to do this either. I said, now let's just keep it even. Oh, but we appreciate this little place down here. That's about the only recreation that us older people here. I don't have any way of going. I never learned to drive a car. My husband tried to get me to. But my children, they helped me out that way.
It's nice you can walk. from here to there. It's very
I
I
drove
usually just go
tractors
down the back way there.
years and years, but I never did take a hold of a wheel of a car. So you
But I
see
still
where I'm
have a
saying.
garden.
Fella told me not long ago, he said, why don't you drive a car? Says it's easier to drive than a tractor. I said, well, a tractor, I got out there in the field, you know. Well, if a tree got in my way, I could run over it, you know. I didn't hurt nobody, but if I was out on the road and hurt somebody, I never would have got over it.
Well, you know, a tractor, they'll get out of your way.
And you're talking about washing. We had to hunt or wash wood a lot of times, you know, and my husband and I, we'd be going along the road. I said, you see old dead limbs. I said, oh, wouldn't that make good work? I washed from 2 to 3 times a week. I had 6. I told them down there, there's teasing about some of these widow women, you know, about how many times they've been married. I said, well, I have had 6 men in my life. If what? Somebody said, well, I said, it's true. I said, I had my husband and my 5 sons. And you know to launder for them.
The scrub board.
I love that. I haven't seen one of those in years.
I have one on scrub board.
See, you put your soap up here, you can tell it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
My mother still has the little one that she washed her.
That's
silk
laid
clothes
dry.
Oh, and handkerchiefs on it.
Yep, little bitty one.
Yes, you can buy those little ones.
And I've had many blisters on them little fingers, you know, from hitting that rub board, you know.
Uh-huh.
Just take all
Any
high.
more questions?
No, I'm through. Of course, I'm not through. I have thousands of things I want to do.
That's all day, I guess.